The European Union was founded after the Second World War to make sure that European countries would not fight each other anymore, but would work together, most importantly, in the sphere of economics. So the European Union consisted of different agreements on economic cooperation, starting with coal and steel, on cooperation between the members on addressing foreign policy and global issues. That all came together after the end of the Cold War with the Maastricht Treaty from 1992, where the European Union was the overarching umbrella that now brought together all these different spheres of cooperation between member states. The European Union consists of mainly continental Europe members. We also had the United Kingdom, but which has left the European Union. The membership is consisting of countries that are democratic countries, that are willing to trade freely within the European Union. Overall, the European Union now has 27 members. The first purpose of the European Union is to create one economic market where all those 27 member states can trade freely with each other without tariffs, where the citizens of the European Union can work in France, in Germany, or in Poland without any problems, without needing a visa, and where you can also cross borders in the European Union without having to show your passport. So the idea is to have one free economic zone and also to work together when it comes to challenges in foreign policy, to work together when there are global crises and to cooperate in your global outreach. The main economic challenge for the European Union at the moment is productivity and growth. Many citizens of the European Union complain that economic growth and productivity is lagging behind because the European Union is too bureaucratized. There are too many rules when it comes to how many hours you have to work. There are too many rules when it comes to products, how products are designed, how they are safe. That is one of the reasons why productivity and economic growth have been lagging behind. The other reason is that export markets, for example, like China, have become more difficult to access for European Union member states. And at the same time, the European Union is still focused very much on industrial growth, on industrial competitiveness. And it has not the kind of top technology companies that are important for innovation that the United States has, for example, Google, for example, Meta. So the European Union is strong on the industrial side, but it is weak on the cutting-edge technology side, which is needed for innovation. What the European Union has to focus on in the future for economic growth and productivity is its internal market. It has to work even closer together. And one way for the European Union to increase productivity is also the defense and military side of it. The European Union will spend more on defense, so many companies in that area will help to increase the growth in the European Union. So the European Union has seen an increase in populist forces, and that means in the European Union context that those populists, either from the left wing or from the right wing, are proposing easy solutions to usually complex problems. We see that, for example, in Hungary, where Viktor Orban, the leader of Hungary, has argued that the problem for Hungary is the European Union itself, because it imposes too many rules on Hungary. We also see those populist forces on the right side often being anti-migration, and on the left side we see populist forces who usually want to spend more on social welfare, which means pensions, insurances for workers, where others are saying, well, we first have to be economically productive before we can spend more on services for those citizens. That brings those populists together. They want easy solutions to complex problems, and usually they have a problem with the European Union as an institution because it is, from their perspective, too bureaucratic and too complex. So European Union leaders are trying to navigate the challenges that the rise of populist forces in the European Union has posed to them. For example, when we look at Hungary, Viktor Orban, the leader of Hungary, is always criticizing the European Union, but he's also dependent on payments from the European Union that for his own budget he cannot go without it. So that's how European Union leaders try to navigate those populists to say, well, you can criticize us, but you still want to remain part of the European Union because it is to your benefit economically to be part of that union. So mostly the European Union tries to embrace those populists and to communicate to them, well, it's actually in your own interest to stay in the European Union alone in this world as a small country. You would be much more vulnerable than you are in the bigger entity of the European Union. So the European Union, since it consists of 27 member states, has different challenges that come from the outside. Most importantly, to the east of the European Union, this is obviously Russia and Russia's war against Ukraine. Ukraine is on the border of Poland and the Baltic states, which are the most eastern countries in the European Union. So Poland and the Baltic states are obviously very concerned that the war against Ukraine will also reach the Baltics and Poland, that sometimes Russia is going to go further than Ukraine, because Poland and the Baltic states have been part of the Soviet bloc before the end of the Cold War. In the south, countries like Spain and Italy are facing a migration challenge. They're close to the Mediterranean Sea, and especially from North Africa and also sub-Saharan Africa, there's a lot of movement and attempts to reach the European Union to try to have a better life in the European Union, which is often overwhelming those countries that are also concerned about potential threats of terrorism coming in through that route over the Mediterranean. So those are the two biggest security challenges from the outside for the European Union. And as you can see, those are very different for the south of the European Union than they are for the east of the European Union. So the European Union itself is first and foremost an economic project. For military security and defense, it is NATO that is playing the most important role in Europe. And there are also many overlaps between European Union and NATO member states. But that does not mean that the European Union is doing nothing to address external threats. The European Union is, for example, financing attempts by member states to invest more in the military, to buy more weapons, to buy more defense products. That is something that the European Union has the economic weight and the financial means to help with. The European Union is also trying to address the migration crisis by discussing different models how European member states can distribute refugees and migrants coming especially from the south. But also the European Union has its own Frontex, which is a border guard institution to help guard the outside borders of the European Union. There's a discussion in the European Union, what is the end goal of the European Union? The European Union is not like the United States, where you have 50 states, but one authority, one Congress, one president that rules the country. In the European Union, you have 27 member states who economically are one market without many barriers. But politically, every country still has its own president, has its own parliament. So the question for the European Union is, should this change at some point? Do we need a president of the European Union, a parliament of the European Union, which already exists but has not a lot of power? That would mean that member states have less power and basically become one state of a bigger entity, of a bigger European Union. That is hotly debated, and many say the way how the European Union works now is the maximum that you can achieve, because citizens want to stay a Germany, they want to stay a France without becoming part of a super entity like the European Union.